Our second speaker this evening is another David Michael Adelstein. This is David Adelstein's first meeting and thus first speech of 2024. It's April. It's April. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's see if he remembered anything about public speaking. Please help me welcome David number 2. Thank you.
About 2 years ago, when I was the young old age of 45, I was having a conversation with my good buddy, Don Julio. And if you know Don Julio, you know that Don is a great guy to hang out with in moderation, but Don could be downright mean and nasty if you spend way too much time with Don. And I asked Don, or Mr. Julio, but I like to dispense with formalities, Don, tell me something I can do to improve me. How can I become a better person? And Don responded, David, my fellow Toastmasters, if you know Don Julio, you know Don Julio is a bottle of tequila, a premium bottle of tequila. I didn't actually have this conversation with a bottle of tequila. I had this conversation with myself, drinking tequila in moderation, perhaps. And when Don responded to me, he said, David, one thing you can work on is mental strength. And I said, Don, you are absolutely correct, because the one area we can all improve on is mental strength. Because in a world where you are constantly bombarded with information, and you're bombarded with ups and downs, and highs and lows, and good and bad news, the one area that constantly requires reminder and focus is mental strength. So as I was hanging with Don, perhaps in more moderation than I would have preferred, I took out a pen and a paper and I wrote down things that I could do to improve mental strength. And the first thing I wrote down was running, because I hated it. The second thing I wrote is mountain climbing. And then I said, I'm not sure I'm one that's going to do well with altitude sickness, and I'm not sure I want to die on the peak of this mountain frozen where, no one wants to come and touch me because I'm frozen and I'm too high up in the mountain. And my kids would miss me, perhaps. So I said, okay, I'm left with one activity that I feel like I can do to improve mental strength. Running. And the reason why running felt natural to me was because I hated it. And I knew that if I really wanted to improve mental strength, I had to do something that I absolutely abhorred. Because if I could accomplish something that I hated, then perhaps I would become a better person. And I was one of those guys that frankly made fun of runners. If you would have talked to me about running 3 years ago, I would have unfriended you from all social media, and I would have said, this person is nuts. So I said, Don, what am I going to do to become a runner? I haven't run a mile in 30 plus years. I'm not even sure I walked a mile in 30 plus years, let alone run a mile. And as I was digging deep, I said, let me spend some time and research what it takes to become a runner at 45. And I stumbled across an article. And this article really resonated with me because the article said, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the very first step. And I said, wow, how incredible is that? Because how am I ever going to go anywhere in life if I don't take that first step, which is always the hardest step with anything that you do. And then I said, well, let me extrapolate on this expression and let me see if I can run 1,000 miles in 1 year. And I knew never running a mile, or at least not running a mile in the last 30 years, that in order for me to do that, I was going to have to start slow and I was going to have to grind it at the end. But you know what? I ran that 1,000 miles in well under a year. And then I said, David, that was too easy. I need to do something harder to achieve better mental strength. So let's see if I can take this 1,000 miles and condense it into a 6-month time period. And you know what? I ran 1,000 miles in 164 days with 14 days off. That was all due to vacation. And it was the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life, because the last 40 days, I had to average over 9 miles a day. And I'm not one that wants to be a marathoner. Frankly, I don't like people enough to run with other people. I like the early morning darkness, right, where it's just me and my self-defeating thoughts. Because if I can conquer my self-defeating thoughts, it will carry the day, and I'll feel like, look, I had to deal with my brain that told me all the things I couldn't do, that never actually focuses on the things I can do well, it just focuses on all the things I do bad or all the things I can't do. And if I can conquer that, I can conquer the rest of the day. And I conquered that 1,000 miles, and it beat me up to the point where I can't run every day. I run every other day, and I focus on distance, but I did it. Because it all started with that very first step. And the reason why that first step is so important is you can control your steps. But you never know what anyone else thinks, and you never know what happens behind closed doors, and you can't control anyone else's step. But you can control your step, and you can control the steps that you take to become a better person and to improve mental strength and mental health. Mr. Toastmaster.
Yay!
Thank you.